Uh, well, I think, when you strip everything away, it's really the act of building, of making stuff. And the older you get, the more you realise that most other people you know actually don't make stuff. And there's a huge complexity to it, and there's a huge joy to realising form and making a kind of existential place, that people get immersed in, and there's a sort of soft dialogue between people and buildings and occasions and events, and I think it's that, really. I think the best compliment that people pay to you is not that a building looks good or whatever, but in fact that it feels good, and that's really what architecture is about. Well, when I was a younger architect, I was probably more reckless, and I would give myself the advice to remain reckless. You get more cautious when you get older and so on. So I think that there's a lot of, now in architecture, there's a lot of look at me-ism, and people make buildings that have what I would say is very little content. And I would say to younger architects, for example, if I was to be one of those, that it's important to remember that buildings are cultural artefacts. They're not toys or magazine illustrations or playthings of architects. They're actually serious interventions in a cultural fabric, and you can lose sight of that sometimes with the seduction of making things. I would say that the most valuable, well, an architect has lots of skills, and you have to have a whole range of them to be able to make a complex building and so on. But the most valuable skill, I think, is the ability to weave a narrative in between the spaces that buildings sit. So buildings talk, and they have character, they have dispositions and so on. And in many ways, like lots of things, whether it's a novel or a film or a play or a painting or a piece of sculpture, there's always a narrative that comes with it. And I think architects are best at giving those objects a narrative so that people can relate to them and feel, even though they may not recognise the story, but feel that there is a story and there's history and there's connection behind something. So it's about the ability to connect, I think, even if it's just a subconscious connection, but it's the ability to connect things. I started life as an architect doing small houses, and because I also come from Queensland and grew up in a smallish country town, I have always had a fascination for the way that places come out of the ground, and that the world is really, when you strip everything down, the camera, the watch, the iPhone, they're all basically they're based on elements from nature. Everything has a natural beginning, and I'm interested in the way that buildings have grown or evolved from the idea of the earth, or you could call that as the idea of earth develops into humanity and so on, but the lineage from nature and landscape into architecture. And so many of the buildings that I've been involved with have an idea about the land or nature in them. Because I think that when people feel most comfortable with buildings, they are because they can feel familiarity through tactility or sight and sound and touch and so on. And those things are often to do with the derivation of the material from nature or from its, the way the thing is assembled and whatever. But also the conceptual idea in a building is very communicable in itself. And so when you see or feel a building, you can feel that it has origins. The classic of those sorts of buildings is the Opera House, I guess, which, although it's not manifesting a shape found in nature or anything, it is absolutely an abstraction of the sort of natural circumstance it finds itself in. So it's that kind of circumstance and poise and things that I like to explore in buildings, although it might not look it when you see them.